Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. We're going to cover a couple of really interesting plants this week. Really two of my favorites. I know I seem to say that about a lot, but these two I really do enjoy. The first one comes from my spring foraging cookbook. We're going to look at it more of an edible plant, more as an edible plant, I guess I should say. And boy, are we getting some spring weather here in the dead of winter. This is crazy, but it looks like March and April have moved in and are hitting us all at once, with February still lingering. I mean, one day it'll be very cold winter day, and the next day it'll be 70 degrees, and we'll get thunderstorms and high winds and tornado warnings. And a couple of days after that, it'll be ice and snow, and it's kind of nasty weather right now. But it's going to be really interesting to see what this spring holds for us. I think a lot of the plants that I would normally be looking for more around Easter are going to be coming in during Lent, and that'll actually be really nice. I don't mind that at all. In fact, this is our ancestors would have loved this. But from the herbal medicine perspective, we have to remember the saying of my great grandmother. She always said, "A warm winter leads to a full graveyard." And what that meant, and what we're seeing right now, is that these conditions, it's not cold enough to kill all the germs, and you're getting enough cold from the winter that you're getting your normal winter viruses that you usually get from shaking hands with somebody and then wiping your nose or something like that. Um, People staying indoors where you're going to have drier air and you're going to be exchanging a lot more viruses. But then we're also getting this warm spring weather, and that does lead to a lot of bronchial conditions and such. And it's an old saying, so probably a good time to really focus in on those antiviral and antibiotic herbs. Make sure you have them on hand. If you are unfamiliar with those, just look back in the archives of this show. You can find them, I think, on just about any podcasting platform, or just go directly to Substack. It should be in the archives there, or directly to Spreaker. That's I actually record and distribute my podcasts through Spreaker. That's my hosting service, and it's really easy to go through the archives there and find all the back episodes. This would be going back probably maybe 2 years. I did a lot of good shows on antiviral and antibiotic herbs, and so definitely worth taking a listen to that. You may be surprised that you already have several of these on hand, maybe even in your herb and spice cabinet that you use for cooking. If not, go ahead and order them, get some seeds, and get them started in little pots in the windowsill. And after your last frost date, get them moved out and grow them, and you'll have them on hand for next year when you need them. And you can start using them really right away, especially the more culinary ones. And then there are others that are really interesting, like Hotunia and such. That grows rampantly in the spring and summer. And you can have that one. It's sort of an odd Asian green. It's normally served as a pot herb, but for herbal medicine, it has a lot of really good antiviral properties. But in the wild, I think we're going to start seeing a lot of the more antiviral and antibiotic herbs popping up early, from the pokeweed to the mints to you name it, the artemisias and all that. So, it's there's always an upside and a downside to everything, the way I see it. And then we'll get into the medicinal herb of the week, and it's one of my favorite. In fact, it's the herb I chose to be on the cover of my Medicinal Shrubs and Woody Vines book. And it is Chimaphila or Pipsissewa, or however you want to call it, by its variety of common names. Wintergreen is one, alligator wintergreen, spotted wintergreen. It's a family of plants, so there'll be several varieties. So we'll get into that in just a minute. But let's go ahead and start with the foraging plant. The one we're going to look at is an edible, and it's unique in that the leaves will start coming up here pretty soon. And the roots will last, and you can actually store them as a winter vegetable. You will probably find this one in the wild if you look for it. Not sure if it's really native to the Americas. I think it was more one of those like dandelion and so many others that were brought in to be an edible and medicinal herb by our ancestors. It's Salsify. Now, Salsify was once a fairly common vegetable that you might have even seen in stores. You will not see it in stores now unless it's in some, super high-end, grocery store that really specializes in such things. It's delicious. It's the cultivated version of its cousin, goat's beard. We've already discussed goat's beard. But if you've ever tried goat's beard, it's a little tough. It's a little, definitely a wild plant. Salsify is the improved version, and I would definitely suggest growing this one in the garden. It's often called the oyster plant, and that's kind of interesting because the root actually has a similar flavor to oysters, and oysters are my favorite food. I mean, I could literally, if a diet purely of oysters would not cause gout and such, and if I could afford it, oysters, in early America and England and the British Isles and France and all that used to be the food of the poor. They'd sell 10 for a penny, believe that or not. 10 for a penny, which was cheap even at that time before inflation. Now they're rather expensive if you have to buy them from a store. In season, I can go to the coast and get a bushel of oysters. It depends on who you buy them from. They're going to run probably around 60 to 80 bucks for a bushel. It's a lot of money, but you get a lot of good oysters from it. Of course, if you are near the coast, you can just harvest them yourself for free. Just be sure to check your regulations and make sure that the Harbor Patrol and police in the area are okay with outsiders coming in and harvesting what they consider to be the locals' oysters, because the local fishermen and such are usually their cousins and friends, or may put a few dollars in their pocket. And what happened to me, of course, one year, I've mentioned this several times, is I went down to the beach where my family's spent the winters for generations and had a home and everything. And I went out into what was marked an open oyster bed. And while I was harvesting oysters, they closed it and arrested me and fined me and took my oysters and clams. And I've probably never been more angry about anything in my entire life than that. I mean, that really upset me. And then it was not only just such a total setup, but they actually fined me for more than the law allowed by a substantial amount of money. I had to go to through the court system by phone because I live several hours away, and finally get an honest person online who said, "Oh yeah, this really is. The law does not allow them to fine you this amount. I'm going to make a note of it in your file, and you write on the back of the ticket that you spoke with me and you're paying this amount. Include a letter with it." So I sent it in certified mail. At least I didn't have to show up in person. That was good, because that would have cost me a lot more money having to drive 4.5, 5 hours down there and likely stay the night, so that would have cost a lot more money. And the postal service lost it. lost my payment. So, like 2 days before it was due, I called in and I said, I just want to verify that you received the money. And they said, no, we haven't. And we were getting ready to issue a warrant for your arrest if it wasn't here by, 7 a.m. on this morning, which was like, uh, it may have been 2 days away, or I can't remember. It could have been the very next day. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. I have the receipt here from the post office. We don't care. If it's not here by this time on this day, we will issue a warrant for your arrest. And I said, okay, I tell you what I'm going to do. I think it had to be there by like maybe it was noon. I cannot remember. It's been a few years ago. I said, I am going to call you. This was the person I've been dealing with on this morning. And if it's not there, I'm getting in the car. I'm driving as fast as I can. I will be in person in court to pay it in cash. They said, we don't want cash. We want a money order. Okay, I'll have to figure out a bank, the whole bit. It was crazy. And just by a miracle, just by the grace of God, my money order from the post office got to them at the very last moment. So, obviously, they make things very difficult in some places, and so I will never set foot in that county of North Carolina again. And yeah, it was a very, very bad experience. So, anyway, it's still better if you can go to a fishmonger, fish dealer near the coast. You can get oysters at a decent price. If not, some of the grocery stores inland will sell them for maybe $1 a piece. That's crazy. I mean, it's an insane amount of money for an oyster. But if you have to have oysters, that's your best option. Make sure they're coming from local fishermen. Otherwise, they're probably coming in farmed from Asia. When it comes to Asian farmed oysters, you got to be really super picky. There have been recalls where, like, things aren't really screened all that well coming in from China and such. But there was a recall showing that the oysters had been grown in raw sewage and somehow still made it into our food system. And a lot of people got sick before they ate them. Those are usually canned oysters. So I'm looking more at Chesapeake Bay oysters or Gulf Coast oysters, and they're usually pretty good. Korean and Indonesian canned oysters are actually pretty decent. They don't seem to have, they seem to be a little cleaner than those that are coming in from China and such. And, remember, if you go to a restaurant and order seafood, that's almost all coming from China. So I'm actually a lot more comfortable spending like $2. They're really usually very cheap. $2-3 on an 8-ounce can of oysters from Korea or Indonesia. I'm much more comfortable than I actually am going to a seafood restaurant. But let's say you didn't have access to oysters at all and you were just craving that flavor, which I do. Salsify is the answer. The leaves are edible. The root of the plant is what tastes like oyster. And interestingly enough, sometimes the leaves will have a little bit of that flavor. Sometimes certain varieties of radish leaves will have a little bit of that flavor. So don't throw away your radish tops. Cook them just like you would mustard greens or whatever, and give them a taste. They're never bad. I actually learned this from a Japanese lady in a grocery store one time, and she was being very particular about buying radishes with really nice leaves. In America we usually don't eat radish leaves, and I was curious, and I asked her about it, and she said the leaves are the best part of the plant. She said the roots are good. We usually pickle the roots or eat them just raw. The leaves are fantastic. So I took her advice and bought 99 cents for a bunch of radishes. Went home and cooked them, and the leaves tasted like oysters mixed with mustard greens. They were fantastic. And so I followed her advice, and I've started growing several varieties of radishes. That's similar to salsify leaves, and you could absolutely combine the two. But definitely grow it for the root in your garden, and use them any way you might cook carrots. Boiled, roasted with meats, fantastic roasted with meats. There are few things that go better with the flavor of beef, than the flavor of oysters. And also with smoked ham. Smoked ham and oysters go so well together. So with roasted meats, really fantastic. Of course, there are many classical dishes for chicken with oysters and such as that. Or you might have your oyster stuffing with turkey. So, I mean, that's not, and sausage, So, I mean, think about combining those flavors with the root of salsify. Really good steamed and sauteed, really good mashed and combined with mashed potatoes. Boil them and mash them with potatoes. Really good, especially with a little Parmesan cheese on there. But this is a classic soup. And I love my soups, especially on a cold spring uh, evening. Nothing satisfies as well as a hot, creamy, good soup. And this one utilizes another root vegetable that we don't often see in American grocery stores, but you should absolutely be growing it in your garden. And it's another one, if you do find a store, you're going to probably pay a lot more for it than any of our ancestors would have imagined because, again, it was one of those foods for the poor. It was a root vegetable that could be stored and would be taken out during the winter or throughout the year and added, grated into a slaw is a really common way to use it, or added to soups or boiled and mashed with potatoes. Those are like probably the three most common ways to use it. Delicious. It's called celeriac. Celeriac is a variety of celery that was bred to grow a large root. And it's actually one of my favorite vegetables. It has a slightly celery, slightly turnip type taste to it. And actually, a lot of times, especially in Asian dishes, they combine turnips with oysters. That's sort of a Japanese thing, I believe. So, this is my recipe for salsify and celeriac soup, and it is delicious. So, get several salsify roots, as many as you want to use for how many people you're going to serve. I mean, just eyeball it. Think of it like you would potatoes in a soup, by amount, by volume. And one celeriac root. Celeriac is a very large root. It would really surprise you. I would say it's from the size of a softball up to twice as big. So one of them is usually enough. And if you don't have celeriac, you can substitute turnip root or rutabaga or parsnip. It's going to be a different flavor, but it's close enough that it's going to work with this. And onion or any alliums you like. If you're doing this in the spring, you can certainly use ramps or spring onions or whatever you got coming up. Wild garlic, wild onions, whatever. Just remember when you're foraging for alliums, make sure it looks like an onion and tastes like and smells like an onion before you taste it. Looks like an onion, smells like an onion, because there are some members of the lily family that look like a wild onion or a spring onion, but can be poisonous. So always make sure it has that distinctive onion, garlic, chive, whatever smell to it, and you got the right thing. So chicken or beef stock, you could use a shellfish stock. That would be nice. It would highlight the oyster type flavor. But really any stock you got on hand. And if you're a vegetarian, again, I feel sorry for you, but you could use a vegetable stock. But I would much prefer a chicken, beef, or fish stock for this. Some parsley or other herbs you might have on hand. Anything you like, really, but I do think parsley is essential. And also some spices of whatever you might have on hand. And what I mean is actually the seeds from these common herbs that we use. Caraway seed, fennel seed, dill seed, carrot seed is very good. Lovage seed. If you grow lovage, I hope you do. Explore that one. Any of those seeds that you happen to have on hand that you like, or a combination thereof. And of course, if you don't have dill seed, just add the dill tops, the dill weed as they call it, with the parsley as you would any kind of herb. You want some milk, some butter, some white wine, and salt and pepper. And that's all going to be to taste. So optional vegetables you could add to this. Corn, delicious. Corn and oysters are a perfect complement to each other. And remember, the salsify tastes like oysters, so think of it in that mindset. Carrot, potato, radish, again, potatoes and oysters, classic combination. Artichoke hearts would be very nice. Cauliflower, perfect. It's a white soup, so cauliflower is going to work very well in there. And optional meats, I'd say chicken, beef, fish, oysters, clams. You could do a lot with this soup in a lot of different ways. So, and like I said, it could be a purely vegetarian soup. The salsify is going to give it that oyster flavor, but I'm going to add something to it, even if it is just a can of oysters from Indonesia or Korea or something like that, or some leftover chicken or whatever I happen to have. So it's really a very elegant soup. I mean, this is one you would pay a lot for in a fancy French restaurant. It's seasonal. You would probably find it on the menu, depending on the region from which the cook came. But it's really upscale, I guess you would say. And when they do it, they're going to avoid using anything that isn't white. So they wouldn't add carrot to it, for instance. And when looking at the proteins, they're going to lean more toward oysters and fish or white meat chicken, not the dark meat, of course. And even the black pepper would be substituted for white pepper to maintain that white appearance with just a few green herbs in there. That's kind of what you pay for in a fancy restaurant, is those little things. I'm a home cook. I don't care about any of that. I care about the flavor, and I'm going to use black pepper, and I'm going to throw in whatever I like. So first of all, let's sweat the onions down in a pot with butter. And if you're using meat, you can brown it at this point along with the onions. I would. Again, they'd be careful not to brown the meat in a fancy restaurant, but I like the flavor of brown meat more than unbrowned meat. So I'm going to brown my meat. And while you're cooking, peel the celeriac. It's a big kind of gnarly root, so you're going to peel off all the outside and then chop it into cubes. And if you don't have the celeriac, just cook the celery tops with the onion. Peel and slice your salsify or any other root vegetables and any other root vegetables you choose to use. Add them to the pot along with the stock and bring it to a simmer. When the roots are soft enough, mash them up. Add your herbs and spices, remove from the heat, mash everything into a fine puree. You could use a stick blender or something. In a fancy French restaurant, they would reserve the meats, if any were used, and then run everything through a sieve, and it would be, just perfectly smooth. I'm not going to do that. I don't mind a few chunks. I like chunks, actually. And I'm going to leave the meat in there. We're just going to mash everything together into, to whatever you like, the texture you like. Then add a glass of white wine and a pint or so of fresh milk. And if you're using fish, shrimp, shellfish, etc., do wait to add any fish or seafood to the end. You don't want to overcook it. Okay, so never overcook seafood. Always remember that. Add them like no more than 5 minutes before you're ready to serve. Bring it back to a simmer, season, and enjoy the taste. Season to taste and enjoy. Let's see if I can get my words in the right order. I did mention the Salsify tops, and they're really very good. And when it comes to the radishes, I think the tops of any radish are good. I have not tried tillage radishes. Tillage radishes may not even be edible for humans. They're very tough. But a daikon, which is what the tillage radish is sort of the ancestor of, would be just fine. And, one daikon has such a huge radish root that it would absolutely substitute for the celery in the soup. But when it comes to the tops, just like I said, cook them like turnip greens. Just give them a rinse. Cook them in a little pork fat, or if you don't like pork fat, use olive oil or whatever you like. And, serve them with a little vinegar. They're really nice. Salt and pepper to taste. You can also cook a few radish roots or slices of salsify root with the greens. It's very good. I do that most times when I cook the radish tops. I'll put in a few chopped radish roots with it as well. If you happen to have some goat's beard on hand, which I said is sort of the wild cousin to salsify, this would be a good way to use it. Chop it in with the more mild cultivated salsify leaves. And in fact, you could add any of the leaves, the greens that you would normally eat in that way. If you had some mustard, if you had some wintercress or something, it'd make a really nice addition to it. And do it to your taste and enjoy it. I think if you like the flavor of oysters, and I know not everybody does, if you like the flavor of oyster, you're going to want to grow salsify in your garden. If you like the flavor of celery, you're going to want to grow celeriac in your garden, because you're not going to find them in the grocery store. The once foods of the common people are now foods of the gourmet. So, and you're expected to pay a lot of money for it. I think it's just a lot easier just to get some seeds from a seed company and grow it. And I think most seed companies do carry salsify seeds, At least the heirloom ones do, and most carry celeriac. And it'd be a little trial and error with the celeriac. Celery can be a little tricky to grow in some climates, but well worth the effort. Even, I mean, it's such a big root, and that one root of celeriac is going to provide so much food. I would consider, if I had to, growing that one in a flower pot. It would be worth taking up that amount of space and giving it the care it needs so that you end up with what you want. And of course, these nice crispy root vegetables can be pickled as well, and experiment with it. Just try it out, and grate it as slaw. Like I said, celeriac, but you could also do a salsify. I wouldn't probably do a whole slaw of salsify, but you could. You could do an excellent kimchi out of grated salsify roots. It'd be delicious. Just do it in place of or along with the radish in a kimchi recipe. So now we'll get on to our medicinal plant of the week. Now, depending on where you live, these plants may look very different. In fact, there are two varieties that grow in my region. That's Chimaphila maculata, spotted wintergreen. That's the one I used on the cover of my book, also called alligator wintergreen, and Chimaphila umbellata, more commonly known as Pipsissewa. My friend in Canada has a Chimaphila growing in her region, a wintergreen as it's called, that looks entirely different from either of these. There's several varieties, and they do look different. Okay, so get a good ID book, use a plant ID app, figure out what grows in your region. They're very small plants, and I would never have thought of them as shrubs. The ones in my region grow less than 6 inches tall, but in other regions they can grow a foot. It just depends on the genetic makeup of what grows wild in your area. They're often called wintergreen, but true wintergreen is another small shrub called Gaultheria, but both plants are used medicinally. Miss Grieve tells us that the name Chimaphila is derived from two Greek words meaning winter and to love. There are two varieties of this plant, umbellata and maculata. The former alone is the official plant. That was the umbellata. Really, the maculata is one that was learned from the Native Americans and didn't catch on in Europe as quickly as the umbellata. She says that the leaves contain various crystalline constituents, chimphyllin and also arbutin, along with various gums and starches and all that. Under medicinal actions, they are considered to be diuretic, astringent, tonic, and alterative. Fresh leaves, when bruised, applied to the skin, act as a vesicant and rubefacient. That means it reddens the skin. It somewhat irritates, kind of heats it up a little bit. Vesicant means it can raise the veins. Used a lot in like liniments and such. Think about it that way. If you've ever used, classic would be tiger balm. If you ever did kung fu or whatever and you got a bad bruise, I had a grandmaster, but your master, if you're taking karate or something, sensei or whatever, he might grab some tiger balm and rub it on there or tell you to do that, and it's really warms the skin, and the herbs in it will help disperse the bruising. It's good for sore aching joints, great for arthritis. So you find this in a lot of liniments and such. She said it is of great use in cardiac and kidney diseases, chronic rheumatism, and scrofula. The decoction is advantageous, and scrofula is the inflamed glands under the throat. The decoction is advantageous for chronic gonorrhea, strangury, that's suppressed urine, catarrh of the bladder, that's congestion of the bladder, and good cure, that's congestion of the bladder. It is said to diminish lithic acid in the urine, that's what creates kidney and bladder stones. For dropsy, it is useful combined with other medicines. Dropsy, again, water retention. It has been substituted for uva-ursi and is less obnoxious. Now, uva-ursi, I don't think it's related. Kind of a similar plant, similar herb, much used in Native American medicine. Combined, the two plants are often combined. Said to be of value in diabetes, but this has not yet been confirmed. And it is very efficacious for skin diseases. Now, turning to the spotted wintergreen, the Cherokee used spotted wintergreen. They said in a Cherokee herbal, it said, wash the roots and beat them up and make a poultice for headaches of any kind. make a tea of the tops and roots for colds and the flu. They were still using at the time the French term for the flu, le grippe, I guess. Um, that's an old term for the flu. Drink a root of the tea if feverish. Tea used for colds and fevers. And drink a tea for women's pains or menstrual cramping. Very commonly used among the eastern tribes. The Lumbee also used Pipsissewa. They called it ratsy tail, and that has to do with the look of the root when you pull it out of the ground. It does kind of look like a rat tail. So the Lumbees called it ratsy tail. But in their Catawban language, it was something pronounced like Cupsiwi. Yeah, I probably totally mispronounced that. But that is somewhat like Pipsissewa, Cupsiwi, Pipsissewa, probably two variants of the same name. But Pipsissewa comes from the Algonquins, if memory serves me correctly. And it was called such because it referred to the plant's ability to break up bladder or kidney stones. The entire plant was collected in a bunch of approximately 1/2 inch diameter and was boiled in a quart of water. Small alligator wintergreen, spotted wintergreen. That's in a bunch of about, what did it say, 1/2 inch diameter. That bunch would probably contain a good 10 plants. So, when you harvested, you had to get quite a bit of it. So that may be one of the reasons that in several regions, the spotted wintergreen is considered an endangered, or maybe not endangered plant, but a threatened plant. It could have been over-harvested. It said the Lumbee healer would usually prescribe a tablespoon of the liquid to be taken 3 times a day for a livestock tonic. So they use it for both people and livestock. So the Lumbee healers also use the pip, as they called it, to strengthen the stomach and treat stomach pain. Pipsissewa tea was also suggested for the treatment of female ailments, backaches, and fever. In a poultice or salve form, it was used as external treatment for cancer, rheumatism, dropsy, and urinary problems. As a wash to aid in the treatment of rheumatism, scrofula, external pain, and ulcerated skin, a poultice was manufactured from the leaves for the treatment of pain. As we said, it's sort of that liniment type quality. A tea was prepared from the leaves to aid in the treatment of colds and fevers and to cause a baby to vomit. So it apparently had an emetic quality. I don't know that that's safe giving it to babies. You'd have to check with someone like a midwife who's really familiar with herbal medicine, or someone who specializes in herbs for women. Susan Weed, Rosemary Gladstar, etc. There are several of them, and I'm not trying to say, I'm trying not to leave anyone out, so I'm not going to name anymore, because there are several good herbalists that specialize in herbal medicine for women. Now, the Thompsonians, they use both varieties. They said, I think this is actually Dr. Thompson and Dr. Lyle who wrote this, the herb grows on the mountains and on pine barrens where boxberry or checkerberry is found. I think you find the umbellata more in the mountains, and and that's the Pipsissewa, remember. The spotted wintergreen is more, I find it more in the sandhills of North Carolina. That's where I find it most abundantly. Or getting into the coastal plain, anywhere where you see a lot of pine trees, which, is everything basically east of Charlotte in North Carolina is nothing but pine trees. I found it growing abundantly in South Carolina and Georgia, in similar regions. So and it probably needs an acidic soil. So where you see a lot of pine trees and azalea bushes, look for that one. So it says it is an evergreen and grows from 3 to 6 inches high, and has a number of dark green leaves about 1/2 inch wide from 1 to 2 inches long, with scalloped edges, bearing several brown seeds resembling allspice. The tops and roots are used for medicine. The roots, when chewed, are very pungent and will be felt for several hours on the tongue as though burnt. That's really where it gets the name wintergreen. That's a similar property of wintergreen proper. If you've ever had a wintergreen flavored gum, it's almost minty in taste, and it has that kind of burning quality. Strong tea made from this plant is good for cancer and all scrofulous humors. Now, again, they're not meaning cancer as we say it today. They mean essentially ulcerated sores that were similar to canker in its origin. And for all scrofulous humors, by drinking the tea and bathing with it the parts affected. This is a well-known evergreen herb and is frequently spoken of as ground holly. I can see why that would be the case. The leaves do look something like a holly tree. Not related, though, at all. And sometimes the berries are nice and red, and it does look like a little holly. And again, where you see a lot of holly growing, you usually have an acidic soil, and that's a good place to look for this plant. As a remedy for dropsy and kidney troubles, it has long enjoyed a good reputation. Its peculiar tonic and alterative properties, combined with a small amount of astringency, render it valuable in weaknesses of the kidneys and bladder. Combined with pokeberries and American sarsaparilla as a syrup, with a little citrate of lithia added, it is most excellent in rheumatism. How many disclaimers do I have to give on that? Okay, so I've done 3 shows on poke, both as a medicinal plant and as an edible plant. The pokeberries do contain toxicity. They were very commonly used in early American herbal medicine, learned from the Native Americans. A wine made from pokeberries, taken just a teaspoonful at a time, is still considered by many traditional Appalachian or Native American herbalists, probably in other regions, but I know it very much among the old folks in the Appalachians as basically the cure for arthritis. But yes, it is toxic, and if you really, the root is the most toxic. I am unaware of any deaths by poisoning from eating pokeberries. Generally speaking, if you have enough, you throw up before it can do you any harm, but it will make you feel very sick if you had too much. So officially, poke, Phytolacca americana, is poisonous, but listen to my shows, read the articles I've done on it, read my books that I've included it in, and make your own decisions. Do more research on your own, I mean, by all means, and make your own decisions. American sarsaparilla could actually be several plants. It could be a member of the spikenard family. It could be a member of the smilax or greenbrier family. And he does not specify which one he's talking about. But by saying it's not, by saying it's American sarsaparilla, he's saying it's not the sarsaparilla from South America, which is the official sarsaparilla. Again, I've done podcasts, articles, and books on sarsaparilla. Really fascinating. 2 families of plants that go by that common name, many of which have similar virtues, I guess I should say. That would be the Aurelia family, and the Smilax family. So, and as far as citrate of lithia, I don't think you can buy that anymore. Now, maybe if you're a pharmacist, so you'd probably just have to leave that out. A small amount of Pipsissewa added to the compound syrup of yellow dock will add to the efficacy of that preparation in scrofulous and other blood troubles where the urinary organs are particularly weak. The leaves are a mild, stimulating, and relaxing alterative. Alterative means gradually brings you back to health, essentially, or can help with some feverish conditions or achy conditions, or for digestive issues, but especially in the glandular system, the lymphatics, and the secrements, secreting properties of the body. It is a good cleansing agent. It carries off effete matter and relieves the liver, kidneys, and skin. In scrofula, it is one of the best agents. Should be used very freely, so they thought it was a very safe plant. We'll look more into that in a minute. At this point, they consider it to be a blood cleanser. That's a controversial topic at this point. Alterative is sort of another word for what you might think of as tonic, which now we can really more consider tonics for the stomach and such, but tonic at the time meant it basically helps you get over colds and flus. So in dropsy, it relieves and tones the kidneys. In gonorrhea, it is soothing to the mucous membrane and cleansing to the blood current. Again, blood cleanser. Now people say you can't cleanse the blood. Well, for centuries, there were herbs used for that purpose. But again, it's that idea of getting the toxins out of the system. We might look at it more of a lymphatic or a lymph cleanser. In syphilis, it is of no little importance. That means it is important. But in certain stages, it may have to be combined with more stimulating agents. It is also useful in vaginal and uterine weakness and in leukorrhea. in rheumatism, especially when it arises from impurities of the blood, again, in cystic catarrh, in spermatorrhea, typhoid, and other fevers, in urinary obstructions, and coughs and colds. Its value is not only for its alterative influence, but for its diuretic action in cleansing the mucous membranes of accumulated solids or mucus. Combined with uterine tonics, it does well in leukorrhea and gonorrhea. In depressed and very debilitated cases, it is best that more stimulating agents be added. In other words, it's fairly mild. In the 1860s, Resources of the Southern Fields and Forests wrote specifically of the Chimaphila maculata, which they called spotted wintergreen. And the botanists that they brought over from France had been finding it a lot around Charleston and St. John, South Carolina. I think that's basically where he was based. He said every part of the plant is possessed of considerable activity and is very valuable as a diuretic and dropsy. He says, see Mitchell Cease's and Dr. Somerville's paper published in London. We won't get into all that. It is particularly useful in those cases attended with disordered digestion and general debility, for in these its tonic properties and general acceptability to the stomach prove highly useful auxiliaries to its diuretic power. It has been successfully administered in ascites, dysuria, gravel and strangury, and acute rheumatism, and in various intermittent disorders. The Indians considered it of universal efficacy, but employed it particularly in nephritic, scrofulous, and rheumatic disorders. Dr. Wood in the U.S. Dispensatory states that it does prove beneficial in obstinate, ill-conditioned ulcers and cutaneous disruptions, used both internally and locally as a wash. The decoction and watery extract are employed. A popular prejudice has existed against this plant. It has received the name of poison Pipsissewa, and Mitchell considered it inert, but its resemblance to the wintergreen, Griffin thinks, should make us question the correctness of this opinion. And yeah, it was questioned, and it was found to be efficacious, as they say. In times of war, where there is need for tonics and diuretics and dropsy or swelling following low and protracted fevers among our soldiers, no plant will be found more serviceable than the Pipsissewa. And he's actually talking the spotted wintergreen, the Chimaphila. And I did use this when I had COVID. It did break the fever. It was quite good. That's just my personal experience. Take it as you will. It is aromatic, tonic, and diuretic. It can be easily collected in the shady woods in almost every part of our southern country. It produces an agreeable sensation of the stomach soon after it is swallowed, increases the appetite, and acts powerfully on the kidneys. The whole plant is decocted. That means you make a strong tea of it. Essentially, you put it in water and simmer it until it's reduced by half. One of these plants may be used extemporaneously among troops, for it has combined tonic and diuretic properties associated with astringency. Its uses consequently are obvious in convalescence for fevers. It can be found in the high woods in almost every locality where a regiment is pitched. Remember, he wrote this for the Confederacy, and the North had embargoed and couldn't get any medications into the South, so he was looking for plants to use as substitutes. The decoction has been much used in scrofula. I have found the Pipsissewa particularly serviceable as a tonic diuretic in the convalescence from scarlet fever, having used it largely in an epidemic which prevailed among a large number of Negroes in 1862. They were treated with the chlorate of potash, followed by the decoction of the plant with tincture of the bark as a stimulant, so used in combination with those. I have also found it to act most beneficially in that pallid, anemic, and quasi-dropsical state, particularly as it occurs in delicate children after they have passed through an attack of malarial fever. When this condition is met with, this plant will be found to act remarkably well. The plant has been employed as a substitute for uva ursi again. It's got a chemist that said the fluid extract seemed to work best in syrups, for cough syrups and such. Now, getting up to 1898, King's American Dispensatory says, this little herb is indigenous to the northern temperate regions of both hemispheres, and is met with in the United States in dry, shady woods, flowering from May to August. The leaves have no odor when dried, but when fresh and rubbed together, they are rather fragrant. The taste is astringent, sweetish, as in sweet, not Swedish, and not disagreeably bitter. The whole herb is used boiling in water or alcohol extracts. Boiling water or alcohol extracts its active properties. They get into the chemistry of it. We'll skip over that. And then under actions, medicinal uses, and dosages, diuretic, tonic, alterative, and astringent. The fresh leaves, when bruised, applied to the skin, act as a vesicant and rubefacient. Its alterative properties are marked, the process of waste and nutrition being powerfully influenced by it. It is especially useful in scrofula and chronic rheumatism, nephritic conditions, irritations of any part of the urinary tract is relieved by it, and the circulation and nutrition of the part improved. The cases of all diseases in which it is most value are those of debility, and particularly when a scrofulous taint is present. The particular field is genitourinary fluxes due to debilitary or depending upon a scrofulous diatheses. The more pronounced the catarrhal character of the disorder, the more valuable the drug. The catarrh of the bladder or congestion again, with offensive urine or urine loaded with mucus or pus or even blood are cases for its exhibition. In other words, it's useful for that. Chronic affections of the kidneys with mucopurulent discharges and also conditions indicating it. The infusion best prepared. Do not make a decoction as boiling impairs its virtues. So they prefer, this is using the tops, the leaves as a tea, whereas the decoction they were talking using more the root and stem. They actually said the whole plant. It is also a valuable remedy for a chronic prostatic irritation, irritated or inflamed prostate, and chronic prostatitis, chronically inflamed prostate. Used both locally and internally, it is a good remedy for scrofulous ulcerations. The infusion has cured ascites and has been advantageous in strangury, chronic gonorrhea, and other mucus profluvia. And as an antholytic, that means it helps get rid of kidney and bladder stones, it is said to diminish lithic acid in the urine. In dropsy, it cannot be depended upon without the use of other more active measures, as it is better adapted to cases accompanied with weakness and loss of appetite. In urinary disorders, it may be used as a substitute for uvauracil and buku, to which it is preferable on account of being less noxious to the stomach. It may, in many cutaneous or skin diseases, is proven very efficient. Under specific indications of uses, they said atonic and debilitated states of the urinary tract, giving rise to lingering disorders with scanty urine, excessive voiding of mucus, mucopus or bloody mucopus, offensive or non-offensive in character, smarting or burning pain with dysuria, chronic irritation of the urethra and prostate, chronic relaxation of the bladder walls, chronic prostatitis, and vesical catarrh. Going up another couple of decades, we get to Jethro Kloss. He used the ambulata, which is more common up north, and he called it ground holly, prince's pine, the king's cure that has to do with scrofula, rheumatism weed, and bitter wintergreen. He used the entire plant and the leaves separately. So all together or separating out the leaves. Medicinal properties, diuretic, tonic, alterative, astringent, and diaphoretic. A good herb to use in kidney diseases and infections. One of the great advantages of this herb is its almost total lack of irritating side effects. It has been reported to dissolve small stones in the bladder. A poultice of the leaves may be applied to the skin for ulcers, sores, bruisings, blisters, etc. Medicinal plants of the southern Appalachians said Pipsissewa is an all-purpose remedy used to treat a wide range of health problems. The Cherokee used infusions as a remedy for rheumatism, colds, fevers, and kidney problems. They used poultices as a wash to treat ringworms, ulcers, cancers, and pain. During the Civil War, doctors recommended Pipsissewa to treat digestive problems, weak kidneys, general debility. It was said to stimulate appetite and relieve flagging energy. Infusions were used internally and externally to help heal obstinate ulcers. Leaves were soaked in whiskey to make a rheumatism remedy that warmed the joints and relieved stiffness and pain. I'm thinking that would be applied topically again like a liniment. Folk use of Pipsissewa includes combining it with mullein leaf to keep children from wetting the bed, and as a spring tonic and general energy booster. Pipsissewa root was an ingredient in traditional root beer. That is true. And again, so was sarsaparilla, and that was one of the ways it was commonly used. According to Southern folklore, Pipsissewa will repel or kill rats, hence the name ratsbane. Well, that's interesting. And we remember the Lumbees called it ratty tail. You got to wonder, was it because of the look of the root, or was it as ability to repel rats? I have no idea. I'll have to look more into that. You know, I love the lore of plants. Into modern use now, Botany a Day says a tea of the leaves is astringent, diuretic, and diaphoretic, useful internally and externally. Plants for a future states of the spotted wintergreen. The plant is analgesic, that means pain relieving, antibacterial, astringent, diaphoretic, diuretic, febrifuge, rubefacient, stimulant, and tonic. I think we've covered all those definitions. The plant has an antiseptic influence on the urinary system and is sometimes used in the treatment of cystitis. An infusion of the plant has been drunk in the treatment of rheumatism and colds. A poultice of the root has been used to treat pain, whilst the plant has also been used as a wash on ulcers, scrofula, and cancers. All parts of the plant can be used, though only the leaves are official. The plant is loaded with the biologically active compounds arbutin, cisterol, and ursolic acid. Arbutin hydrolyzes to the toxic urinary antiseptic hydroquinone. Oh, so it actually turns into hydroquinone in your urinary system. That's why it's useful in cystitis. Medicinal use of Pipsissewa. Pipsissewa was much used by many tribes of native North American Indians to induce sweating and treat fevers, including typhus. The plant contains hydroquinones, which have a pronounced disinfectant efficacy within the urinary tract, and modern-day herbalism mainly employs the plant to treat urinary problems, such as cystitis, urethritis. That's true. The whole plant is alterative, antibacterial, astringent, diaphoretic, diuretic, rubefacient, stimulant, and tonic. An infusion is used in the treatment of various problems related to the urinary system. It is also prescribed for more serious conditions such as kidney stones and gonorrhea. A decoction is very efficacious in the treatment of skin diseases. Used externally, the fresh leaves are rubefacient, and internally they are of great use in cardiac and kidney diseases, chronic rheumatism, and scrofula. Only the leaves are official, though the whole plant is often used. The plant is loaded with the biologically active compound arbutin, cisterol, ursolic acid. We just covered that, how it turns into hydroquinone. The plant contains glycosides and essential oils that are used as astringent and tonic. The plant harvested when in flower, and the leaves on their own can be harvested during the growing season. And it is evergreen, so if you had to get some in the winter, you can certainly use the root at least. The leaves are dried for later use, and a homeopathic remedy made from the leaves used in the treatment of inflammations of the urinary system. And the Peterson Field Guide for Eastern and Central Medicinal Plants tells us of Pipsissewa. American Indians used the leaf tea for backaches, coughs, bladder inflammation, stomach aches, kidney ailments, as a blood purifier, as a diuretic, astringent. Drops used for sore eyes. That would be the astringent quality that would help with that. And, well, probably the pain relieving, the analgesic quality. Leaves were smoked as a tobacco substitute. And this is where you actually, when you're looking through herbal lore, and a lot of the books especially written in the last few decades that like to explore Native American herbal medicine, you'll often see Pipsissewa included in some of the various combinations that are known as the smoking mixture called kinnikinnick. And that's usually combinations of tobaccos, various herbs, red osier dogwood, and it has various qualities. It's a relaxing smoking mixture, probably a lot better for you than smoking tobacco by itself. Depending on how much of the red osier dogwood and another plant that's not coming to me right now, used, it could have a little bit of a narcotic effect. So be careful what books you read and make sure they're not, how should I put it, not written by hippies. Okay, not that there aren't some great herbal books written by hippies, Michael Moore being one, Stephen Herod Buhner, Susan Weed. She certainly, I think, would laugh if laugh in agreement if she was included in that category. Many of them are fantastic. Some of them were not done with a lot of personal research, I would say. That's why, when I go through, I always like to tell you my personal use with the plants. I don't like to use one source. I like to source them from many, many books and say, and this is now my experience of having used this herb. So, let's see. Physicians formerly used leaf tea for bladder stones, uh, kidney inflammation, nephritis, in other words, prostatitis, and related ailments. Science confirms it is diuretic, tonic, astringent, urinary antiseptic, and its antibacterial activity. Loaded with biological active compounds, arbutin, we've been through that again. Finally, the PDR for herbal medicine, the physician's desk reference says the drug contains quinine, which is said to be a urinary antiseptic. Well, and that's what they mean when it hydrolyzes into hydroquinone. It doesn't actually contain quinine, but it becomes essentially quinine. Alcoholic and aqueous extracts of the plant are said to have antimicrobial properties in vitro, and that means a tincture or a tea, essentially. So, y'all, that's going to wrap it up on Chimaphila and on Salsify. Two incredibly different plants, two plants that you might be able to find growing wild. You may actually want to cultivate these. They are very useful. And as I said, when I had COVID, I was looking around for anything to break that recurrent, lingering fever. And really the two herbs that did the trick for me was the spotted wintergreen, taken as a tea, and poke root, Phytolacca americana. That's what really finally kind of flushed my lymph system and got that virus out and gone. And those were the two primary herbs. I use various other herbs, especially those in the Swedish bitters, the large Swedish bitters. There are a lot of good antiviral herbs in there, and I was taking that daily, as I basically always do. I like the Swedish herbs as a daily tonic. Swedish bitters, I mean. But yeah, I really owe it to the Chimaphila and the poke root that got me finally over that virus. And I try to always have them on hand. Fortunately, I live in an area where I can harvest them regularly, or as I did with the wintergreen, just go out in the yard and dig some up. It's pretty easy for me to get my hands on it. You may want to look for some or order some or keep it on hand just in case. And as far as Salsify, if you like oysters, get that one growing in your garden. I'm telling you, it is really, really good. And it is so weird to have a vegetable that tastes like oysters. You'll find a million uses for it. So anyway, y'all, stay safe in this kind of volatile weather. When these various waves of hot and cold are coming across us, the weather can get really violent very, very quickly. So do stay safe, and I'll talk to you next time.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.